Well, I'm going to go ahead into the presentation here, Enterprise FileMaker. And I just want to give, if there's anyone online that doesn't know who I am, I'll just give you a quick background of who I am. I'm the founder of Lumenfire, CEO, and one of the solution engineers here as well. Been using FileMaker for 28 years, certified developer in all the versions since 8. I have a degree in electrical engineering and theater. And these are some of the things that I enjoy doing, really faith, family, and fun. I like to travel, like being in Florida. I will be moving to Florida sometime this year with my family. Disney, magic, juggling, trumpet, piano, drums, and French. Those are all kinds of interests. So if you're looking for something where we might have some commonalities. We also have today with us Sean Kruger and Mac Richardson. I believe he's online from South Carolina. And yes, he is online. And
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Mac.
Hi.
They are some of our brilliant engineers at Lumenfire that have experience with working in the enterprise with FileMaker. And so I'm going to just kind of let them lend their expertise to the discussion about Enterprise FileMaker as we go on. So glad to have them here. And we are broadcasting from Minnesota at the Lumenfire headquarters. And this is what it looks like when there's not snow. There is some snow today. It's a little bit colder, but this is in the fall. So, and Lumenfire, just as a quick overview, these are some of the tools that we use on a regular basis. We're Claris partners, we're Apple Consultants Network. We use Laravel and WordPress. So really in the web and Claris space. So Enterprise FileMaker, what is it? What do we mean? We're going to go over where does FileMaker fit in the enterprise and what challenges there are for FileMaker in the enterprise, and along the way, maybe some case stories or studies, experience that we've had. What do we mean by the enterprise? We're not talking about Star Trek, really. We're talking more about these are some funny things that if you're talking about what the enterprise is. It means that you spend more time in meetings than actually building things. It might mean that you have such a large project that it is doomed to failure. So those are some negative aspects of being in the enterprise. But in general, the enterprise, which is a large company, has a larger team size. The development team might be larger. The customer base might be large. Legal and compliance is a lot of work. The project length might be longer. There's complication of ops and deployment. The distance to other teams might be great. And the pain, if it's offline, might be a lot if it's running a lot of your business. So for our discussions, what we're going to really say is that enterprise is greater than a small to medium business. So that's kind of where we're focusing on. A lot of FileMaker gets used in small to medium business because it can run an entire business in that case. But in the enterprise, it's a little bit different. So enterprise means greater challenges and potentially greater benefits as well, because you're going to be able to use the power of FileMaker to do a lot in a lot of different ways. These are some enterprise case studies, and these are companies that we specifically have worked with in the past that we would consider to be enterprise clients. And so I'm not going to pull out the names necessarily of these as we talk about particular stories. We're going to keep them anonymous in some ways just to protect the innocent or the guilty. But I just wanted to let you know that this is the kind of companies we're talking about. They're very large companies with a lot of employees, multiple locations sometimes, and well-known, Fortune 50, Fortune 500. But because they're large, they're definitely considered enterprise. So how does FileMaker fit in the enterprise then? A lot of it fits many places. And generally in departments or work groups. And that it fits where often where solutions that the built-in IT can't or won't do, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because if they won't, if you do something that the IT can't do, sometimes you can get a bad name. You know, it's like because you make them look bad that they didn't do it first or that you did it faster. So, but on the other side of things, you also are filling a need, a real need that's something that the clients really need to help their business to run. More and more, it's scaling to larger systems. Now, like with a company like Target, which I had a lot of experience with there, FileMaker is not going to run all the cash registers. You know, that's just obvious. That's not its place. But it can, we had 40 some databases in different departments that all ran different portions of things. You also have a fit in integrating systems. So you have systems in different areas of the company, and FileMaker can talk to them and pull information together and give you kind of a, it can work across different things by talking to other systems. I think that the biggest threat to enterprise FileMaker or using FileMaker in their enterprise is leadership who do not understand the value or place for Claris FileMaker. And you see this in large companies. We'll talk more in the challenges area coming up. So what are the benefits of FileMaker in the enterprise? And I think that this is really comes down to the same benefits that you have in a small and medium business. You have the customization. You can build a totally custom solution, the speed at which you can do that, the ease of use or accessibility that you can have multiple people who potentially actually work on the solution or have accessibilities, and then the connectability that it can talk to multiple systems. So we're going to spend the majority of the time now coming up talking about some of the challenges that there are to having FileMaker in the enterprise around selling it, the IT staff, cost, legal, security, access, integrations, and deployment. Now, I'm kind of speaking here from the idea of being an outside consultant and working in the enterprise, but it also applies if you are working in a large enterprise, because you have to sell it to your managers or sell it to somebody eventually to get it approved. And generally, so it requires an internal champion. That's the best way it's going to happen. It's like if somebody that actually works at the company really, really wants it, because it's hard to sell it from an external standpoint within a company unless you have somebody there. And politics are always a big portion, a big player in larger companies, especially because there's just so many different departments, so many people that need to give approval in order to get something done. Sometimes we've had meetings with enterprise clients, like first meetings, and you have like 12 different people in the room, you know, not just IT, but from security, and it's just like everyone needs to get their approval on something. But one of the things is to make friends with IT. So if there's ways that you can bridge that gap in that you're not threatening, you show that you're understand them, that you used to be in their seat, and that can help a lot towards making it a possibility to use FileMaker in the enterprise. And you want to check the boxes. They often have checklists of all the things that any new solution needs to do. And more and more, that's true that we can check those boxes of security and such with a FileMaker solution. Licensing FileMaker can be a challenge as well because it's not been straightforward what type of licensing it's the easiest is if the company already is using FileMaker and you're just adding on a few more users or something. But if you need to decide you're the first ones within a company to get a license, it might be for that division or for that department. And then the question is, do you mention FileMaker or not? Because in some large enterprises, they've had poor experiences with a previous developer, or they were using old versions of FileMaker, and it just got a bad name or a bad rap within that company because they didn't understand it and what it is and where it fits. And so you might come in and just say, we're building a solution and use WebDirect only. And they don't even have to know that FileMaker's on the back end, other than the fact that you can build it quickly and all those advantages of FileMaker. So the IT perspective, the people who work in IT, to them, FileMaker might be an unknown. They've just never worked with it before. And it might not be on their standard software list. It used to be a lot of the time that people would go, well, why don't you just use Microsoft Access because we own that and it's part of the Office suite. And then you have to really say, well, how is FileMaker different from Access? And that isn't as much of a question anymore, but getting on the standard software list is a challenge in most companies. You have to really educate people and they have to find it. But FileMaker is then perceived, any software that they don't know is perceived as a risk, because if the outside consultant is the only person that knows how to work it or how to support it, what if that person goes away? Or what if the relationship with that external client, external vendor is no longer there? So they're seeing it as a risk. And because they don't understand it, therefore they just don't want to deal with it. So it's what are the solutions to some of those concerns? Or those education and examples is one thing. So you really have to educate what FileMaker is today and how it can help, and show that the examples from a lot of similar companies or companies that they are competitors with, in order to prove that the case that it's something that they might want to look at as a solution. Again, needing an internal champion, and often that could be somebody within the company that worked at another company that used FileMaker, and they know the value of it and how it helped to them. Making it as easy as possible is also helpful. Just giving the IT all the information they need, spoon-feeding it to them, giving them web links or whatever, so that they don't have to do the research on their own. And speaking their language, if they know that you actually understand all of the terminology that they use internally and how they work, that's going to help. And involving the right players from the beginning, so that you don't get canceled basically later on by a department or a person who wasn't involved in the original discussion. Or like I was talking before, just make FileMaker another web app. And that would be deployment via WebDirect probably, where again, they don't even need to know it's FileMaker. It's just another web app. So how does FileMaker check the boxes? It can run on any operating system platform pretty much. So that's not a big deal. Mac or Windows or Linux, the server too. It has the security, compliance, and encryption, and satisfies their security needs. It can have up to 500 simultaneous connections, and that used to be less. So it can handle larger work groups directly. The data can be made available to other groups through standard APIs or ODBC. These are just like checklist items that in the past, FileMaker didn't necessarily have all of these ways to access the data or ways to run, but more and more that makes it better for the enterprise. It can be in the cloud or on-prem. That's an important place in some cases, and scaling it in WebDirect too, which now has supported browsers and up to 1,000 clients. It advertises, under certain conditions. We haven't tested it to that, but the fact is you can scale it to more people. And then there's the idea of can you be SOC 2 audit compliant with FileMaker, which might be important in some organizations, and that you can do some of that through using Git, and there are ways, like exporting DDRs, but it's adding a lot more administrative tasks to the development, which slows development down, but it might be necessary in particular organizations. Clarus Connect, I think, does have the SOC 2 audit compliance already built in. Then there's the challenge of cost. So the implementation of FileMaker solution is going to far exceed the cost of the licensing. And that's not clear because there's so much today SaaS software that's sold. So when they hear FileMaker is going to be a solution, they think, oh, FileMaker is going to do everything for me. How much does it cost? And if you're just talking about the FileMaker license, you're talking about the platform. It's like buying Excel. You don't get the spreadsheet with it. You have to build the spreadsheet. So, and the implementation costs in a large organization can easily be a lot more because everything is multiplied as far as like getting it onto the computers is harder, and working through the administrative people that you need to talk to ends up being more expensive. You can spend a lot of money on admin before you even start developing it all. Another challenge of cost is that FileMaker doesn't cost enough in comparison. So let's say you came in I've heard stories from other developers where they came in and their bid was, let's say their bid was $50,000 to do something. And then another company came in with a different tool other than FileMaker, and it was $100,000. Well, then there's this perception that, well, the $50,000 one definitely can't do everything that the $100,000 one is. It's just got to be, there's something wrong there. So then if you start bidding higher on the job, you have a real comparison. I mean, it's like, so in this case, this person that was talking about this story actually did start bidding higher, and they got more jobs, which was ironic because you would think that the low cost would be more palatable and they'd want to go with that, but it was just thrown out because it didn't seem serious. There was one instance where we were working with a client, and we had bid the FileMaker client licensing to them, and I was out for a week, and we noticed that we had bid the licensing itself incorrectly, and so it was going to cost more. And as soon as the client heard this, they were going to put a whole stop on the project because they were afraid. So I had to have a CEO conversation with them when I got back. I got on the phone and I told them, it's like, well, it's gonna be like $1,000 more than the licensing was a difference. And he was like immediately, oh, I'm used to a lot larger numbers. I thought it was going to be $10,000 to $20,000 more. So it was not a big deal whatsoever. But in the enterprise, they're used to big numbers. And so you just have to keep that in mind as you're bidding things out and stuff, that these might seem like bigger numbers to small to medium businesses, but in enterprise, it's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. So um, you maybe need to adjust your thinking there. And also prioritizing a blip on the radar. So, and I'll give the example here at Target. A FileMaker project for a department might be on the order of $50,000. So just as a guess, like the development from beginning to end of something that's really going to help them. That is a blip in comparison when they go to prioritize all their projects in the IT department and they're working on multi-million-dollar projects to replace all of the cash registers in all of the hundreds of Target stores, and any of these projects that you're talking about, $3 million, $50 million or whatever, to do these IT things, FileMaker doesn't even appear on the list. It's like it's just so small in comparison that it doesn't get prioritized. So that's a challenge. It's like how do you get the money allocated in a department? And so often they might have something in a different budget that they're able to, not even their IT budget, that they're able to transfer over in order to get the project done. But that's just how big business works. So legal challenges. In a large enterprise, you have contracts and lawyers, and no matter what, there is going to be a legal department, and no matter what, they are going to change things on a contract because that's kind of their job. If they don't change anything, then it's like they didn't earn their pay. So when we give them, like in a standard client arrangement, we have a master service agreement that we give to people. And so the question is, we'll send that on. That's our standard procedure. And they'll go, yeah, I don't think so. Here's our master service agreement. This is how we work with vendors. And so it gets thrown out. This is large companies. And then we have to kind of look at that agreement and say, is it something that we can actually work with? And we have had so many large companies where they're wrong fit agreements. They'll send us the agreement for a vendor that normally goes into people's houses and works as like a technician or something. And so you're looking at this and you're like, none of these things apply. It's like we need background and drug testing for every single person that's going to actually just work on your web solution. I mean, not that that's a problem, but it's just not usually in our standard MSA. So you're going to have legal challenges in any enterprise, and it's going to be a very long cycle in some cases. One of our clients, I think it was Medtronic, it took a year to negotiate the ability to even work with them. It was just to get the contract done because we were back and forth with the legal department and stuff. So if you're trying to implement a IT solution that's quick to market, there you just lost a year because you hadn't even signed the contract yet. And then knowing what's negotiable. We have to give up on some things. You just say, it's not worth it. It's like, we will take that risk. But then there are certainly some things that you can't take that risk. I mean, if they're asking you for a full warranty on the fact that, like if anything happened, you'd pay all of their thousands of people for any damages or whatever, that kind of thing, which could basically put you out of business. That's a non-negotiable. But if you want the work, it's like they have the upper hand in a large enterprise as far as negotiation. And then there are often insurance limits. So they're going to require that you have cyber security insurance and those, so that checklist of things. But sometimes they will have limits on the numbers that you might actually not have because we're just not used to working with such large projects as they are. It's like if they say you need to have insurance up to $5 million or something on this project, well, you can just go and tell them I have up to $1 million and this project's smaller. And so, and they'll just change it, so things are negotiable. Also, like a lot of companies will be asking you for your internal policies and what are your security policies at your company. So that all has to be formally written up and documented so that you can provide it to them. And then payment flexibility. We generally get prepaid for almost all the work we do so that we are able to prioritize, but that doesn't happen in a large company. I mean, they have rules internally that they can't prepay. So you have to determine is the risk versus the reward. Am I willing to take the risk that, and usually for us, if we get assigned a PO, we can start work because that's an agreement from a company that they are going to pay it. So challenge of security. It's very high with financial institutions that, so there may be within medical areas like HIPAA, FERPA for educational institutions, and encryption and backups. And you just need to be able to talk to all of these things and know what their implications are into a solution and be realistic with that. There was a pause on error conference where we talked just about FileMaker security a number of years ago. And they came up with a security checklist at that time that's out at that website. I think it's being maintained by somebody somewhere, but we have our own internal one that we would use just to make sure we're checking all the boxes on security. Then there's the challenge of access. And maybe Sean, you can talk a little bit about this because some of our clients, we have limited access.
Yeah, currently working through some more headaches with this with one of our clients, but access to their systems is limited as a contractor, outside vendor. There are requirements for VPNs, and for some, we can only work on their things through a remote desktop that they control. We have, one in particular where they were using Citrix, then they changed to Microsoft Remote Desktop with Azure authentication on everything, and it works, but everything got like 10 times slower. And when I called their help desk to ask, they said, yeah, it takes us that long to log in too. I'm like, oh, okay. So everyone knows, and it's just, how it is. So nothing we can do about that. And then, if the FileMaker server is something that's on premise with them, it's like another set of hurdles to get access to that. So for a while we were avoiding that by, just closing the files on the server, downloading them to our remote desktop, doing a, migration assistant deployment, and then putting the file back online. That stopped working with the Microsoft Remote Desktop. It was just incredibly slow, even though it seems like it should be a local network connection. And then there was something going on with Microsoft's cloud-based, blanking on the name of it, but
Teams.
No, just
Azure?
the OneDrive, I think.
Oh,
We're basically like the remote desktop computer is also trying to sync everything to OneDrive. So you're downloading these large database files and it's trying to sync it and you're trying to do a migration on it and it just kept failing. So then now we're back to getting access to the server and that's, we've had, a number of people with their IT in the loop and just like nobody can quite figure out the right kind of access that we need.
it has gotten a lot easier since COVID because even some of our enterprise clients that were strictly on site for the longest time have gone to remote users.
Yep.
And so they're more regularly supporting remote desktops and that sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah, we had for a different client, when all of their people went remote during COVID, then they started running into, speed problems because they had users on VPNs with various home internet connection speeds. And we ended up switching them from FileMaker Pro to connecting with WebDirect, and that increased their speed tremendously. We had to do some tweaks to make sure everything was WebDirect compatible. But once we got through that, it's been a success, and they no longer have to worry about deploying FileMaker Pro to their users because now it's just another web app. Yeah, and another headache if you're on a remote desktop is you may not have, it's not really your computer. You don't have all of your customizations, if you have some plugins or developer tools, it's just not as convenient. It's like in that case to run a DDR through FM perception, I run the DDR on my remote desktop and I email it to myself. And then I can run it on my actual computer. So
Yeah, and the corporate training requirement for some of our clients, like to have anyone actually work on their systems, they require that we're kind of like an employee for them in that we've gone through all of their HIPAA training or that sort of thing. And so, you start a project and you have to go through 40 hours of online training in order to just be able to access their systems. That's
Yeah.
a significant overhead.
Yeah, and not just regular HIPAA stuff. I mean, we have requirements that we all do for training for HIPAA compliance just as our corporate policies. But then we have to go through, a very similar thing with them, and then also information about, Medicare, Medicaid. And it's like the department we're developing for is marketing. This doesn't apply to me at all, but okay, I'll, go through these additional 4 hours of training.
Yeah. There's also a shared responsibility, which is for like potentially a server. You have your internal IT. If you have an on-prem server, they're doing a lot of the work to support that server. Maybe not knowing how a FileMaker server works. And so we've run into issues where we've told them to how to maintain that server and keep it in the backups running well and stuff. And then they didn't actually implement what we told them. And it caused a problem. And thankfully we had pulled off a backup on our own system, just to make sure that we're covering all the bases. And then they had a server crash or a database corruption or something. And it was our backup that saved them because they, it's like, and then they kind of learn and they will implement the things that because a lot of times IT, it's like they have a little bit of pride in what, it's like, we know how things work. We know we've got everything down. And so then they don't always take your advice. And so just have to be careful.
Oh, yeah. Dan brought
Oh.
up just, like keyboard shortcuts and commands are different when you're
Right, yeah, you
not
might
really
be
on your own
working, you're
computer.
used to working on a Mac, and now you're working on a Windows remote workstation all the time. So
Mhm.
it's just another challenge of doing the development in a system that you're not as familiar with. I'm going to move on to the challenge of integrations. So if you're working with FileMaker and you want to have it talk to other systems, so what systems within that company can you talk to? Where can we get a list of all the employees if we need that? For example, is that in what system has that? Then the question is, can you even access it? Are they going to let you? And it's like, because you don't often have any clout, but if there's somebody internally that's your champion that can request that access and say it's necessary for this project, maybe. And then the question is, do you actually know how to talk to that? Can you write to those APIs and such? So integration is a challenge. And Sean, one of those challenges in large companies you mentioned was about email,
Yep.
sending email, which is a simple
Yeah.
thing in FileMaker,
Yeah,
right?
any custom app eventually grows to the point where they want it to send emails. And email deliverability, reliability, becomes a challenge. If they're just using FileMaker's send mail script step, with a client, that's one thing where it's just on their systems. But if you're getting automated, they want to get email status updates when, a job changes to the next step and the next person's assigned to it. Well, then you're talking about using some kind of transactional email service and sending things, with their domain through another user. So now you're accessing, getting another level of, altering something on the CNAME on their certificate. And so it's another, have your IT people do this kind of thing. And it might be, to get better reliability or volume, if it requires, it might be another paid service. And, it may only be a few dollars a month, but it's another ongoing subscription that they don't want to manage.
Right.
And so, it's one of those things where little costs are sometimes more challenging to get through than bigger things like
Yeah.
Tim mentioned.
Yep. And so you want to make that as easy for them as possible. I mean, if they don't have to manage that subscription and you just do it for them and charge them for the time or whatever, that can simplify things. So FileMaker talking to the world. So there are all these different services out there which have become so important because they do things really well that FileMaker doesn't. It's like, so it's important that FileMaker talk to them. And there are different options, it's like to do that. Certainly built-in commands in FileMaker, requiring other tools. So there's the text tool set of FileMaker. Then you have Claris Connect, which allows you to talk and do a lot of different integrations or talking to external systems. And now Claris Connect, you can also build custom integrations, which you couldn't in the past. And then Claris Studio can do some things as well. But the way we've solved it for Lumenfires, we built a lot of these things. These are solved problems for us for doing integrations with Brilliant Connect, Brilliant Flows, Brilliant Portal, and Brilliant Gateway. So we've created these solutions that we reuse then in various enterprise situations, or even in small to medium businesses. It's very helpful to have that already be something that you've done before, so that you're not just building it completely from scratch. The challenge of deployment. having a development version, a staging and production potentially has gotten a lot easier because we're able to use tools like Auto for DevOps. And that means a lot in a big enterprise, especially because you're not doing cowboy coding where you actually have the file that up to hundreds of users might be actually working on, and you're not working on it live, and you're able to make those changes, test them, make sure that they're correct, and then easily deploy them actually with a click of a button. So that's huge. And large organizations would totally expect that that's the way things work with FileMaker. Timing for updates is more of a challenge, that you're going to have to do that alongside the calendar of when their busy season might be, or you're going to have to notify a lot of different users that something's changing. You have to have more documentation about that.
And if you've got, a bigger company with users around the country or around the globe, they're not just 9 to 5. So you can't just say, okay, well, they're done for the day, we can deploy this. Well, they've got users logging on at all hours of the night. So they have to, know that that's coming so that they don't throw an alarm saying, hey, the system's down, I'm trying to get on.
Again, more admin tasks in order to make things work compared to a small to medium business where there's just less people, and you might be in control of all the tech. Then there's a question of deploying FileMaker client versus WebDirect. And again, in a larger organization, it might be really difficult to get the workstation group to deploy FileMaker client, a new desktop app that they need to test. They need to package it up and they need to distribute it. It's just it's gotten easier as the distribution methods for these have gotten easier, but these workstations are generally locked down. So you can't just go and install FileMaker on your workstation on your own, or even in a work group. You have to get it approved through some IT organization, and they need to package and distribute it. So it just slows the process down of implementing a new solution. So if you're able to use WebDirect, that's much faster because they just need a browser and on their computer, and everyone has that. On-site server maintenance. I think I talked about this a little bit. It's like you are relying on IT to do some of those tasks because you may not even have access to the server. And then approval and distribution of software. If you're using plugins, that's even another challenge, as far as, it's like, then you're not even talking about really installing just FileMaker, but you're installing FileMaker and a plugin and some other helpful tool. Makes things more complex. So you want to keep it as simple as possible. So what are some best practices in the enterprise? First, I would say putting FileMaker server in the cloud is very, very helpful. If at all, you can, just not have it on-prem, not have to deal with IT. It's like they just look at it as, oh, it's an application service. It's like you just take care of that for us, just like any other hosting. I mean, it's like if somebody's hosting a Salesforce solution, it's like they generally are not running that on-prem. It's in the cloud. Staying current with FileMaker client and WebDirect, not allowing them to fall behind and have much older versions around, which is going to have technical debt that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, that's another benefit of WebDirect is, and combine that, if you control the server in the cloud, then you upgrade the server, that automatically upgrades WebDirect because it's part of that. You don't have to worry about individual workstations.
Yep. Making sure that you are locking things down with security, you're utilizing the real FileMaker users or LDAP or some sort of external authentication as well. Utilizing Agile as a development methodology is a good best practice that most IT large organizations are going to understand. And then some code considerations as well for how you actually build the solution. So go ahead.
I was just gonna, one thing with the security, working with larger organizations, they're often much more likely to be using something like, Azure or whatever that has a SSO, single sign-on, and FileMaker supports that. Little bit of a headache to get that set up. It's again coordinating with their IT for the server, but once it is set up, it's really nice for their users and for you that you don't have to manage FileMaker users. It's just you have to make sure that that user is part of the right group, and then they have access. Yeah, you can add some stuff within your FileMaker application for user preferences, but it's generally a lot easier to manage adding many users.
Right. So here's the 30-second overview of Agile. You're breaking down a larger project into doable chunks. You're writing stories that the user understands, and then you're delivering working software along the way, and having regular communication with the users. So most enterprise are going to be familiar with some form of Agile. Code considerations. This is one of our, nothing is easy. You need to simplify everything. It's like when, especially in enterprise, when somebody says, oh, can you do this? As a developer, you go, oh, that's easy. Yeah, we can just do that. It's like, never make that assumption, because something that's easy when you have control of everything is very difficult when you have a lot of players and security approval and all that sort of thing. So you want to simplify everything where you can. Use standards that are out there, like Anchor Buoy. Again, if you have multiple developers working on something, Anchor Buoy is just something nearly every FileMaker developer understands and can work on the solution. Use a standard theme with standard naming conventions. We'll simplify things. Standard tables and field names. These are important things for any FileMaker development, but when you're in the enterprise and you may have multiple people working on the solution or something, it's even more important. And then you should have documentation, which is internal to the application, and also end user documentation, which quite often is, you can maybe have the most proficient users of the tool assist with building that documentation. But it's more important, it's like when, or even recording videos of how to do things. As people turn over and there's somebody new, you could just say, go watch that video, and it's important. So kind of summarize here, we've got 8 minutes left. Mac, I haven't like directly asked you for anything. Sorry.
No worries. No
Do you have
worries at all.
any comments?
Well, actually, on your previous slide, I was gonna, one thing that stood out to me when first reviewing this was, that's a really good point at the top, that nothing's easy, because even standardizing on a theme, in my experience with some very large companies that I've worked with before, like even the theme, like you just never think there can be, okay, how many groups are we going to get involved in this project? Because I've worked with companies before where they're really prickly about like their design standards for like anything, just like for that the logo has to be a certain way on your theme. So even that can get more complicated than you think it should be in a large organization. And you just have to be ready to roll with that because, you know, uh, even just trying to standardize on the theme may involve, in one instance that I personally dealt with, all of a sudden the marketing group is involved with something that's not a marketing app that we were working on, but because it had an interface that a client, that one of their customers might actually be exposed to, okay, well, now it's got to have the corporate colors, logo treatment, spacing, everything has to be taken into consideration. So even just standardizing on a theme can, in a large enterprise, become much more complicated than it normally would.
Right. You got to have the exact PMS color on the screen.
Yes, yeah, or certain specific fonts have to be used even,
Right.
which in that case, their IT department, that was a standard part of their setup bundle, was the corporate fonts were always included. So you could depend on them being present, but it was still just one of those things where you're just like, okay, so now there's another group looking over your shoulder. I guess that's my point, is with a large enterprise, be prepared to have a lot of people looking over your shoulder.
Right. That's helpful. Well, I'm gonna, I promised that we were gonna talk enterprise and AI. I'm gonna do 5 minutes AI really fast because so summary, FileMaker does have a place in the enterprise. You can find the right fit where it is, gain the experience and knowledge that's required in order to support, and then employ standards and navigate the complexity of legal, insurance, et cetera. And if any of this is beyond your experience, we can help because we've done it. So, I mean, feel free to reach out and help, get some help.